Okay, it is that time once again. We are going to be doing our updated Guild Gear Strive tier list. This patch has been out for a little bit now, and there has been a lot of development in terms of just how characters have developed, how people are viewing the game now. We've gotten tons of different perspectives on the game, from getting to see a lot of international play with things like the Arceus World Tour Finals and EVO Japan and everything. So I think now is a good time to look at the tier list, update it a little bit, and just kind of talk about how, at least for me, I'm viewing the game a little bit differently and I'm valuing some things different. Keep in mind the tier list is going to be ordered from left to right. Also, just because a character maybe is at the end of the tier list does not necessarily mean they're bad. I think most characters are pretty good right now. It just kind of comes down to stability and consistency and that type of thing. And more than just being a tier list, I want this to be a way to create discussion and for people to get different perspectives on the game. So keep that in mind as well. So I have a top 5 for this tier list. I don't really have a top 5 in my mind, but I think it's just more fun to try to make a defined top 5. So we're going to do it that way. Now, I said that my tier list is going to be different, but one thing that is definitely not different is that I still think Happy Chaos is in fact the best character in the game. For me, the thing about Happy Chaos, it really just comes down to risk reward with how the character functions. He has the most consistent and stable reward in the game. He has the easiest time just establishing his turn. You know, if you block a poke in neutral, right? You block a 2S, you block a far slash. He's going to start his offense from there. Make you block something and get his game started that way. His conversions, like I said, are amazing. His buttons are very good. He just doesn't really have like big downsides. The biggest issue he has as a character is like human error. If you mismanage resources like your bullets, your concentration, or whatever, that's obviously a problem for the character, which is relevant. I don't want to act like it's not, but I just think that even if you play the character in a simple way, he is so effective, and if you do the harder things and you really try to milk what the character can do, he just gets even better. His only other downside is defensive options, right? He doesn't have an invincible reversal, and his normals can be kind of stubby in certain defensive situations, but his reward for mashing out is so high that I don't think it's that big of a problem. He uses YRC better than most, if not every other character. He's able to side swap very effectively. It just, I don't think his defense being bad is that big of an issue, because I don't think it's that bad ultimately. If you're just looking at the game from a strict power level perspective, I think he is definitely the best. The only arguments that could be made is when you start considering human error and stuff like that. All right, so the next character is a character that I have been very much thinking a lot about. I've actually been playing him quite a lot as well as a secondary character, and I think he is honestly so incredibly powerful, and I definitely underrated him in my last tier list. That's going to be Chip. So Chip is a character that is very big over in Japan. Japan thinks very highly of this character. We think highly of him over here too on average, but I wouldn't say that he's considered like top 3 over here until maybe more recently, now with all the international competition we've gotten to see. At the end of the day, this character has every tool. That's not really deniable, right? He has amazing movement speed, he has amazing normals, they're all very fast, very hard to whip punish. His pressure is some of the best in the game. His Oki is very good. He has some of, if not the best defensive options in the game. The only downside to this character is that mistakes matter more because he has low health. The caveat to that is that because he has every option in the game, you are both less likely to make mistakes, and because he has such amazing defensive options, even though he has less health, I think that his mistakes still end up not mattering as much as a character like Milia, for example, who's like, you know, another similar speedy character. She doesn't have as good defensive options. Or you have a character like Ram, or, you know, any other character like that, where they're lower health, they don't have the defensive options that Chip does, right? Chip has a 3-frame, he has an amazing 5-frame. He has a DP, he has good options to get out of the corner. I don't think the downside of having low health, it's not that much lower than other characters. And I've even noticed this playing the character myself. I've been playing him a lot on stream. I've entered some tournaments with him as well. I don't honestly notice having that much less health than when I play Ram. But what I do notice is having so many more tools that are so much harder to deal with. The fact that Rekka 1 is only -4 and leaves you at a situation where most characters cannot contest you very well, and you have the threat of Rekka 2 and or Rekka 3 anyways, is so powerful, just that on its own. So yeah, I am putting Chip a little bit higher than I did in my previous tier list, and I think he is quite a strong character. Next up on the tier list for me is going to be Mei. Mei is a character where the way that she makes people play the game, the way that they have to respond to her, because of how her reward is, you have to be so afraid of making the wrong decision as any character. You can be a high life character, it doesn't matter. She hits you and you will explode. She has amazing normals in neutral between 2S, far slash, 5k is the big one. She's good at jumping. She has like JH, JS, those are all great normals. She has good air to airs between, you know, JP, JK, JD. And obviously she has Dolphin. Dolphin is like the big one that is so good at forcing situations. Because of the existence of Dolphin, which is basically a neutral skip, she makes you have to respond, and she's the last character you want to be responding to because of how her reward works. One wrong decision and you literally lose half your life, if not more. Her pressure is kind of basic, I suppose, but when you consider the reward behind it, it doesn't really matter that it's basic, because one simple decision and you might just lose the entire game, right? And that basically defines Mei as a character. She's a very simple, very straightforward character, but because of the implied risk behind everything you have to do when you're fighting against her, she is especially powerful in a tournament environment where people are more likely to make mistakes. People are more likely to be nervous. I have started to consider kind of the human element of the fighting game a little bit more lately when it comes to tier lists, and specifically how people play in a tournament situation when you only have a 3 out of 5 set, right? And I also just gotta say, when it comes to matchup spread, I talk to so many people in this game, right? So many people that play so many different characters that play the game differently. I have never seen someone tell me their character beats Mei. And if they do, there's like maybe 1 or 2 instances of it, and they say it's 5.5 their favorite. You know, when you think about it, like, she doesn't even lose matchups either, right? Which is another thing you got to consider when it comes to tier lists. Yeah, I think Mei is incredible. She's very simple, but oh so effective, and that's all you need in a tournament environment. Okay, next at 4th in the tier list, I'm gonna put Leo Whitefang. Leo, to me, is just Mr. Consistency, right? And we see it time and time again in every tournament we watch, basically. You know, when it comes to tournaments, like I was saying, people are more likely to make mistakes and whatnot because of nerves or whatever. Leo is a character that I think thrives in that type of environment because, one, he's more forgiving because he's easy to play. He has high health, he has great defensive options. His defensive option in Flash Kick leads to his win condition, which is great for him. I think his neutral is great in most matchups. There's obviously a couple matchups where he can struggle a little bit, but I think he's good at controlling space and with punishing, which is very valuable for him. His offense, you know, back turn can have some inconsistencies to it, right? Like, you have to make reads sometimes when you're in back turn. Ultimately, I think that's like the negative way of looking at it. The positive way is that you have offense that is forcing the opponent to take risks that they don't want to do. So I think his offense is very good. Front turn offense is very underrated. He's very good at boxing people in the corner. So I think his front turn pressure is honestly kind of underrated. If we're just talking strict power level, he's not that high. He's not that cheap of a character. But I think when you consider, again, the human element, tournament environment, I think he becomes a lot better, and he's already really good. Yeah, I think Nago is top 5 still. They did nerf him in pretty notable ways this patch, but I think the concept of the character, like what he does, is still very much the same. The strength of this character is how easily he can force very strong situations on the opponent, from neutral, from offense, whatever it may be. Those situations, you have to pick some very basic option, and if you were wrong, you were probably going to lose the round. That is something about the character that has not changed and is so valuable, especially in tournament. You know, on paper, does he lose some matchups? Sure. Right? I have heard time and time again about how he loses to Axel, he loses to Faust, he loses to all these characters. And then I watch tournament sets and he hits them once and they lose the game. Which is something I've really been thinking about in this game, is that matchups and, you know, how things should go on paper do not tell the full picture. And that's really something that has made me think about the game a little bit differently. So while he does have some instabilities to his play because of how he functions as a character, I think the raw reward and volatility of the character, especially in a tournament environment, is super good for him. The only disadvantage he has now is that, you know, sometimes when you hit him, he takes more damage, and 2S is a little bit easier to deal with. That's it. So he's still very powerful. All right, so that's my top 5. Again, I don't really have a super defined top 5, but if I had to make one, it would probably be this. Moving on, we have the S tier. Now, the first character I'm going to put is a character that I think we need to talk about. It's Bridget. I think Bridget is so good right now, actually. I think this character is really strong. This character has basically everything you want in a character. She has amazing normals. She is able to play both aggressively and defensively. She has great movement options between scooter, just having good dash speed, a great backdash, having good air options. Her pressure is very safe. She does not have to commit in her offense almost at all if she does not want to. Her mix-ups are, you can't do anything about them, right? Like if you get 2D'd, you just have to deal with 2 mix-ups back to back. And if you get hit by them, it's going to go into either another mix-up or a wall break or whatever. Defensively, she's great too. She has a great backdash. She has a fast 2K that always goes into 2D. She has a DP. It's probably the worst DP in the game, but she has it. And because of her air options, she's good at, you know, getting out of the corner and stuff like that. The fact that this character so consistently goes into strong Oki or strong setups does not ever have to take a risk on her own offense. And just how good her neutral is and how a lot of characters have to respond to it is so effective, especially in tournament. All right, next up, you know her, you love her. I still think Ram is really good. I do. The thing about Ram is that I think, you know, on paper, she's incredibly powerful, right? She has amazing tools, amazing dash speed, her normals are great, her conversions are very good, her corner pressure is strong. However, I think the issue with how she functions as a character is it's easy to make mistakes with her that can be very punishing when people know the matchup. The way that her offense works, and just in general, her game plan is actually pretty fair relative to what others are doing around her. It doesn't mean that it's less strong, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm conveying that well. But ultimately, she is very good. Her matchup spread is pretty consistent, at least on paper. You know how I was mentioning how certain characters like Nago, maybe he doesn't have the best matchup spread, but, you know, in practice, those issues don't matter as much, right? Ram is kind of the inverse of that, where she has all these amazing strengths, but the reality of the situation is you see Ram players just get oops to death all the time because of how she has to interact with the opponent. So she's kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum. However, I think that is her only downside. You know, ultimately, I think she is still a very good character, very good tools. Her neutral's great, her pressure's great. To me, she's like the benchmark of like a top tier in this game, if that makes sense. All right, next for me is another character that I'm putting a little bit higher than I did in my last tier list. I think Giovanna is really good, dude. She is a very simple but effective character, yet again. She's a character where her game plan is very straightforward, but that doesn't make it bad. Her game plan is so simple that you can't like mitigate it in any way. You just have to interact with her and take, you know, basic guesses pretty much all the time. Her neutral is so good, her dash speed is too fast to react to, so you're constantly guessing a neutral. She is so good at whiff punishing, which kind of feeds into itself. When you have a character that you can't react to forward movement from, they're going to also be really good at whiff punishing you because you have to play so preemptive against them, right? This is how that works. So you're never comfortable when this character is just even like halfway across the stage from you. This version specifically, they gave her some better conversions, specifically off of things like close slash, counter hit 5K. A lot of air hit situations are better for her, and those matter a lot because previously a problem that she sort of had is that her conversions could be kind of inconsistent and not really that high damage. But I think they just averaged out her damage just enough where it's like really impactful for her. She's just a very good, solid character that when you put a good fighting game player behind her, she's incredibly effective. She's all you need. So for the next character, I have to apologize, okay? At the start of this patch, I was successfully gaslit once again to believing something that is simply just not true. I have seen the light once again, and I'm ready to acknowledge that Zato is in fact broken. I don't know what I was thinking last tier list when I put him as low as I did. This character is the definition of buffed in tournament in my mind. In that, on paper, does he lose matchups? Yeah, he definitely does. He loses a lot of matchups on paper. Does he have a lot of inconsistencies and instabilities as a character? Yeah, he for sure does. Does this character win for no reason all of the time? He definitely does. His offense is probably the best in the game on average. If you get hit and wall broken by super by this character, you basically lost the game. You know, is his neutral the best? Not really. If you end up making a mistake or get caught in neutral by something, which you're liable to do, especially in tournament environment, you might just lose the entire game because you got hit by 2K2D. I have seen this character win games for absolutely no reason too many times now to ignore. While he does have downsides, I think risk reward wise and his ability to just rob people is too strong to put him lower. Now, next is another character that I think is honestly pretty similar to Zato in that regard, and she might honestly be better. Is Jacko. This character has like the same thing going for her in my eyes, where she just can win for no reason. She can snowball. The thing about her though is that I think she's a little bit more stable than Zato. I think she's a little bit better neutral because of her 2K. Bar slash is okay. Her 6P is good. 2D is obviously great. 5H is good. Minions can be very annoying to deal with in neutral depending on the matchup, but I don't think her offensive capabilities are like the peak of it isn't as broken as autos, I think. Specifically, post wall break isn't as good for her. Definitely nowhere near as good as autos, I think. Some matchups, some characters are a little bit better at denying the minions from putting them in block stun, but it doesn't matter, right? Like, you can say all these things on paper you want about this character, but I see so many people land 2k 2d and then the game ends. Okay, I think that's it for the S tier. So now we're gonna move on to A+. To start this off, we're gonna go with kind of a hot topic lately is Soul bad guy. Soul is just good. He's just a good character, right? And I feel like a reason I used to rate this character a little bit lower is that I thought he had to be more risky than he actually is. There's an argument that he could be up here because he's not that unstable or anything. But what I've seen watching Japan play, and specifically Mochi, is that you don't have to play this character high risk. Does he struggle in like some matchups, right? Like some matchups neutral can be kind of hard for him or whatever. Sure. But he has something in common that a lot of the characters up here have, where his average reward can be insanely high, right? Especially with meter. He hits you once and you just explode, right? It's just over. So I value how simple the character is. He's very easy to play, and your reward is so high when you're right, and you put people in such simple situations that you can always just win. Is his overall power level like insane, right? Like, he's not like a Jacko or a Zato or anything, which is why I have him in A+. But he's just a good, well-rounded character that forces simple high reward situations, and that's all you need. Next, we're gonna do Baiken. I think she's just too explosive to put her lower. Again, does she have some issues? She has bad matchups, instabilities, blah blah blah. Yeah, but I think her explosiveness as a character is just something you cannot ignore, right? When she has 50 meter, you're literally just guessing for half your health on a high or low. You just have to guess on it, and that is something that is just incredibly powerful. Her neutral's fine, like, it's good, you know, it's good enough, and you have to guess against some of the things she does, which is good. Defensively, she's amazing. She has a 4 frame, which is pretty good. She has a parry, which you can't safe jump, you can't play around it safely. Baiken players get a lot of extra chances because of their defensive options. People cannot enforce their game plan as hard against her because she has parry, and parry is too rewarding to not take seriously. A DP is less rewarding, right? It's not as problematic. Whereas if you get hit by Baiken parry, you actually really care. To me, Baiken is a character who she can very easily cause upsets in bracket, but I think it's also hard to consistently win with her because of her instabilities as a character, which is why I have her a little bit lower. So she can win any matchup, but can she win every matchup? That's kind of the way of thinking I have with her. All right, I'm doing it. Next, we're putting Axel. I think Axel's really good. He is very consistent as a character. I would say one of the most consistent characters in that game, I feel. The thing about Axel is he's very off meta, right? Like, he's not an offensive rushdown character or anything like that. The way he makes you play neutral, you always have to play to his pace, which is very effective. Pretty good defensive options, namely his 2K is like one of the best Abare normals in the game. And I just really value the way people are forced to play against him. You are constantly having to take a risk to approach him, and if you don't, he's just building up risk, he's building up meter, and then when he has meter, everything kills you. Because that's the other thing about this character, his damage is so high off a lot of pretty common things, especially this patch, because the buffs to how they affected his combo routes is insane to me. Specifically, I think Rainwater gave him an answer to something that has always given him trouble, which is dash block, delay button. As one of the most common things that people do against Rainwater is they do dash block and then delay 2K or delay some other button. Axel's Rainwater tends to punish people for doing that for quite high reward now. Obviously, you can punish it, and some characters are better at punishing it than others, but I still think it is just so good, and in general, his damage is actually deceptively high in a lot of situations. Continuing on, I'll put up Gold Lewis at this point. I think Gold Lewis has fallen down a little bit on my list, mainly because the nerf to drone is honestly pretty considerable for how the character functions. He's obviously still very volatile. This character can just win the game off of like one situation, but I think the way that he has to play neutral and defense a lot of the time is just pretty risky for him. He's like a weird balance of, like, on paper he has a lot of issues, there's a lot of matchups that are pretty bad for him, but then he has a thing going on for him where in a tournament environment especially, he just hits you once and then sometimes you lose the game. But I think compared to some of the other characters that have that going for them, he has more steep downsides as a character, but he's still really good. All right, I gotta be the biggest Anji believer on the planet, but I think this character is good. I need people to update their thoughts on this character from the literal launch month of this game. He has gotten so many buffs and so many things have changed about the game and the character He is not that bad anymore, bro. His neutral is fine. Is it great? No, but it's fine. His offense is really good. His average reward is really good. His defensive options can be pretty good. I don't think he's like some crazy broken character or anything, but he's solid. He's just good now, you know? Does he like win a lot of matchups? No. Does he lose some matchups? Sure. But I just think like overall, he has fine enough neutral. His conversions are actually really good now. I think he's a solid character, and I think he plays into the meta of the game, and I think he does better in tournament because he's a high reward character that forces you to guess on things, and he has high health. In comparison, another character that people often would put higher than Anji, or probably have put on their tier list already, talk about Testament, because my opinion of this character has gotten lower slowly over time, and there's one big reason for that, and that really comes down to the fact that I think they simply give you too many chances. The thing about fighting games, especially a game like Guilty Gear Strive, is the more chances you give somebody, the worse off it is for you. When your character does not convert all the time, when your character does not have overwhelming offense, when your character doesn't just, you know, ooze damage all the time, when your character doesn't have amazing defensive options either, when your character can't force people to guess in simple situations. Testament is so off meta, they play the game so differently. And do they do what they do well? Yeah, they do. They play their zoning game pretty well. They have pretty safe offense for the most part. The problem with the characters, they just give people too many chances to rob them, and they're a very robbable character because of how they function. That's why I kind of rate them lower nowadays, and that I think they're kind of off meta. The big advantage, I will say, if we want to, you know, look at it in a positive outlook, is that I think from a matchup perspective, they actually have a lot of interesting advantages, and to me, they're a good counterpick character. They beat some characters, at least on paper, even some characters like Leo, or characters like Lycan, Gold Lewis, stuff like that, maybe even Nago, right? They have some matchups that they just do pretty well in. Are they good? They are good. They're a good character. They're in A+ for a reason. I think that's it for that tier. I think we can move on to A tier, which are all just like good characters, but they don't stand out in any massive way. They don't have like great matchup spreads or anything. They're just like good characters that tend to get overshadowed by the rest of the cast. And I want to talk about a character that I feel like I'm like the biggest believer in, I say as I put her this low on the tier list. I think Millie is good now. I think she is good. I think her neutral is actually very strong. And in a vacuum, I think her neutral is pretty good. She's got amazing movement speed. Her 2K is great. Her far slash is good. Her offense, when she gets Oki, right, like a knockdown, her offense is great. Her problems come in from the fact that she's relatively low reward on average, and she has trouble starting offense from like blocked situations where she has to take pretty big risks a lot of the time. She doesn't really get, you know, extended pressure turns. She doesn't have like the type of reward that makes somebody super spooked to do something. But I think ultimately her Oki is good enough to kind of make up for it enough. I don't think she has like big glaring issues anymore. Next we can talk about Kyle, I suppose. I think Kai is like one placement higher than my last tier list, solely because I value having a DP and good defensive options a little bit higher nowadays. I still don't think Kai is a great character. I think he's okay. He's got, you know, good buttons, good options, good offense, but not great. He's just very middling in most cases. His best thing is honestly his defensive options, because Sun Dipper is amazing. His 2P is good. His 2K is good. I don't really have many profound thoughts about Kai other than like, I think he's fine. He can win most matchups. He's just not really doing anything other characters can't do. He's not really like winning matchups in any big way. His JS is broken. That's true. Okay, I forgot about that. His JS is broken. That's it. JS and Sun Dipper. Next, we can talk about Ino. Ino has a lot of instabilities as a character. And frankly, she is a character who is entirely comprised of instabilities, quite frankly. The way that she has to play neutral, the way that she has to play defense, the way that she has to play offense, all of it is her constantly having to RPS either in good or bad ways for herself. I think the strength of the character is that she can be hard to fight in a stable way at the same time. Like, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. She has good offense, obviously, though it can be kind of risky because of what she has to do. She kind of has to go for reads on offense sometimes. Can she rob people? Sure. Can she be robbed very easily at the same time? Definitely can. Lastly, for this tier, we have Faust. I still don't think Faust is particularly great, but he's all right. Items, namely, create a lot of volatility to some matchups, which allow Faust to, you know, kind of get some wins. He's got alright buttons. His offense is okay. I think he has a lot of issues as a character, but he's like just good enough that I think he's fine. He has a couple of matchups that he may notably do well in, like Nago, Gold Lewis, that type of thing. So yeah, I don't think super highly of him, but he's alright. We gotta talk about the newest character, the newest addition to Guilty Gear Strive. which is of course Bedman. Now, Bedman has only been out for not even a week at this point, but we have, you know, initial impressions. I already have a video talking about the character, actually, if you want to go watch that. But what I'll say about Bedman is that I think worst case scenario, which is where I'm going to put him, this is where I think he is currently. I'll just make the rest of the bottom tier, I guess. I think he's bottom 3 currently. That's my current thoughts. I could see him moving up to like somewhere in this tier maybe if things develop well enough. My thoughts right now is that the character has some of the worst frame data I've seen in a fighting game character. And I think they have a lot of trouble getting their game plan started. I think a lot of characters just maul them. Just terribly so, both in neutral and on their offense. And really the main strength of the character is that they have some good offensive sequences. They're like a cheap character, but not a good character, if that makes sense. You know? Like, they're gonna do some stuff that's just like, wow, they just did some crazy mix-up and then it, you know, destroyed your health bar. That'll happen like 1 in 10 matches, but the other 9 matches are gonna be the bed just struggling to get going, getting put on defense with some of the worst frame data in the game. And that's just kind of where I'm at with it right now. And we have Sin, who I think Sin is like, he's just okay, but like he is okay in like a bad way. His normals are just middling. His offense is just painfully average. His defense is good. That's probably his best thing. He has a great DP and good normals to mash with. But he's like a character who like doesn't have outstanding qualities. And then he has a mechanic that holds him back for some reason. I don't really know why it's like that. I think he can still win, but the odds of him winning consistently throughout like a tournament bracket are just not that high. And then lastly, it's Potemkin, bro. Like we know it's Pot, right? He struggles a lot of matchups. He doesn't have good movement. His defensive options are bad. He can win the game sometimes because he's a grappler and he knocks you down, and his command grab does a lot of damage. That's all I got. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the current version of Guilty Gear Strive. You know, my reasoning for why I have the characters where I do. I want to know what everybody thinks in the comments below. Where do you put all these characters? I know everybody has different tiers in this game, which is a good thing. I think that Strive is in such a spot where people have varying opinions now, which is cool to see. I think things are still developing as well. I think that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and I am looking forward to seeing how Guilty Gear Strive continues to develop from here on out.